Charlie and Andy back here on the Thames River, just north of the Gold Star Bridge, awaiting the beginning of the final race, the 4-miler between Harvard and Yale. And as we wait, we might review the seasons for both these crews. Both these crews got off to a very fast start through the dual season, Andy. I think both were undefeated.
Absolutely, yeah. Yale had their first undefeated season since 2007, which coincidentally was the last time they won the boat race in the 4-miler. Yeah. As Coach Gladstone explained to me, that was almost an accidental lineup. As you recall, the winter was very cold, and they were racing Brown in March, and he threw together a lineup that he thought was pretty good. And they kept winning. They beat Brown, and they went through the rest of their regular season undefeated, beating a very talented Princeton and Cornell crew in the Carnegie Cup. And then they found themselves ranked first going into the sprints.
Eastern Sprints.
Correct. And the sprints did not go as planned. They did not medal in that sprints. And Harvard won the sprints, as you know. And what people forget, or perhaps overlooked, was that Harvard was also undefeated for the spring season leading up to the sprints.
Right.
So they found themselves a little bit on the back foot after the sprints, and they prepared for the IRA, slightly different lineup in the IRA from the sprints, and they made the grand final for the first time in a long time at the IRA, which was a good accomplishment for Coach Gladstone. It's the first time in his career at Yale that they've made the grand final, and they came in 6th. And interestingly enough, guess who came in 5th?
I know exactly who came in 5th. I was down there for that, and to just reprise what you said, the Harvard crew went undefeated into the sprints, had a very good race, made a big charge at the finish, and won the sprints, as you noted. Then down to the IRAs, and I was there for that great race. Washington took off at a 40, and some would say that they went to 1,000 meters at something like 42 or like that, and got a length, and just hung on to it. Harvard made a big push in the middle of the race to get back into the pack, but then seemed to run out of gas and finished 5th, as you noted earlier. So I think both these crews now come into this race saying, hey, we were seated first, it didn't go the way we wanted to in the sprints. The IRA wasn't what either of us wanted. These are two very good boats that ought to be racing very closely here for the 4-miler.
Right. I'm sure there was a lot of unhappiness leaving New Jersey for both these crews, and there have been some adjustments to the lineups. I know for the Yale side, there is a new stroke, Pete Tortora, a sophomore, who, interestingly enough, I know very well.
I hear this. Say it. Go ahead.
He was a freshman lightweight just last year. I could tell you what he weighed in May. It's a lot different than what he weighs now, but we're very proud that Pete has been selected out of the lower boats to lead the Yale charge.
And they moved the big guy who was the stroke back into the engine room?
Yeah, Hubert, I'm not going to pronounce his last name, but the big German is now at 5 seat, and he was stroking the whole year and now has moved into 5 seat. So I think Coach Gladstone thinks, okay, we've made a little rhythm change. We're going to see if Pete can set a rhythm that the big guys can follow, and that's been his Coach Gladstone's MO for a lot of his championship years at Brown and at Cal. He had a smaller, lighter guy who had good rhythm and was a racer in the stroke seat, and he had some big studs behind him to power him down the course, and we'll see if that magic can be reignited here today on the Thames.
You know, it's the natural proclivity. The natural proclivity is to take a look at those big erg scores and fill out your boat that way, but it isn't necessarily the fastest by any means.
No, and if you measured the success on body weight, I think Yale would win this race. But of course, the Harvard guys are pretty talented. They're a little smaller. We mentioned earlier about strength to weight ratio, and of course that really will tell over the distance here, which is 4 miles, and it's not getting any shorter.
You know, people don't. I don't think. Let me give you an example, because I don't think a lot of people understand this. But you sit on the starting line of a Varsity 8 here, and the total weight of the boat and the crew is almost a ton, and you got to pick that up and get it moving 12 or 13 miles an hour, and you got to put the blade in and take it out and accelerate that mass every time. If instead of weighing a ton it weighs 1,800 pounds, you got a little easier chance of doing that.
Sure.
And so it's that strength to weight ratio is a critical issue.
Well, this is, like anything done at the highest level, this requires a huge amount of fitness, a huge amount of skill, and a lot of chemistry. It's not just the biggest guys in the boat or the biggest ergs or how much everybody weighs, but it's how the pieces fit together. And,
it reminds me, and I'm sure you've read it too, that great book about rowing, The Boys in the
Sure.
Boat, when they finally found the stroke for that Washington 8 that made all the difference.
Sure.
It just... and it's hard, isn't it, finding that person?
It is. Every coach out there has to find at least 3 or 4 of them through his program. You got to find a varsity stroke, a JV stroke, a 3V stroke, and sometimes those guys are obvious, and sometimes it takes a while to find them. And it's taken Pete a little while to get into shape, and he did a good job in the JV and the 3V through the year, a little bit unheralded perhaps because those crews did not have the undefeated season like the varsity did. But, the eye of Coach Gladstone has plucked him out of the lower boats, and we'll see what he can do. I'm excited to see this race for many reasons,
but who's in this boat now for Yale?
Okay, the coxswain is the same coxswain as last year, Oliver, and this year he spent a little time coxing the JV, but Oliver Fletcher is the coxswain for Yale. He's a senior from Eton College over there on the Mother Island of England. Again, stroke, Pete Tortora. He's a sophomore, 6'2", now 185 from Fairfield Prep in Connecticut. 7th seat, Robert Hearn, one of the 2 freshmen in the boat. He's 6'5", 195 from Brisbane, Australia. He went to Anglican Church Grammar School. 6th seat, a fellow Australian, Simon Keenan, a junior, 6'6", 215 from Melbourne, Australia, and Xavier College. 5th seat is Hubert T, we'll call him. I apologize to all my... Trzebinski, right. Thank you. I went a little smoother than I thought. He's a sophomore, 6'8", 210 from Berlin, Germany, and he went to the Flatau Oberschule. 4th seat, Ollie Wynne Griffith, the other freshman in the boat, 6'6", 206 from Radley College in England. 3 seat, Dave DeVries, a sophomore, 6'8", 210 from Culver Military Academy.
I told you these guys are getting bigger and bigger. You wouldn't believe me.
San Diego, California is his hometown. Zach Johnson, the captain, a senior, 6'6", 205 from Redwood School out in Ross, California. And Owen Simonton, also a senior from Melbourne, Australia and Wesley College. He's 6'5", 210. So they average, Pete brings him down a little bit, they average 198 pounds. That includes the cox, I guess. I don't know why they include him in the...
That's a big boat.
It is a big boat. And certainly they can...
Let's just see if they have the strength to carry it down the course.
Absolutely. The wind, as you might be able to hear in our headphones, has picked up quite a bit.
Yeah.
But the water is still pretty flat. It's going to be a good start. It's funny. Right now, both the Harvard and Yale crews are paddling past us here on the radio launch and are heading to their respective stake boats. Yale again will, as in the JV race, will be on the
west side.
West side, thank you, and Harvard on the east side.
Yep.
And usually you don't find 2 crews paddling next to each other. One usually defers to the other, so they're not racing the paddle, if you will.
This wind that we're experiencing now is a bit of the sea breeze, a bit of a westerly. And it's blowing, obviously, from, I'd say, the southwest to the northeast, which means, and this river, one of the few waters in New England that runs dead north and south, means that we're dealing with a cross tail. And that will tend to drive the boat down to the starboard side a bit, because just the wind's action on the people in the boat tends to tip it a little bit. And that can be a bit of a challenge. You've got to change the way you row. You got to row a little higher on the starboard side to keep the boat balanced. We'll see if that affects either of these crews. The Harvard crew comprises, in the coxswain seat, William Hakem out of Belmont, Massachusetts, Andrew Holmes from Lochwinnock, Scotland. He had a nice speech today at Harry's Memorial in that wonderful Scottish accent. Charles Risby is the 7-man out of Melbourne, Australia. The 6th man is Max Meyer-Bossy from Westport, Connecticut. The 5-man is Vincent Breet from Alberton, South Africa. The 4-man, moving up from the freshman boat, is James Johnston out of Cape Town, South Africa. The 3-man is Andrew Reed from Wayland, Massachusetts. 2 is James Medway from Pymble, Australia. And then our own Peter Shalley, son of Ali Shalley, or Oliver Shalley, whom we all knew many years ago from Chestnut Hill, Mass. So a good, strong boat there. Not the size of the Yale boat, but going back to the performance that both these crews, they had a very successful season until the very end.
Now, in that lineup, we talked about the change in stroke seat for Yale in the Harvard boat. Is that the same boat that raced at the IRA, or is that a slightly
With
different?
one change.
Right.
One change, James Johnson moves up as a freshman into the boat, and Ben Linton, a senior, moved down to the third Varsity 8 that we saw race, or rather the second Varsity 8 we saw race the 2 miles, or 3 miles. So both boats are still warming up here. We've got about 7 or 8 minutes left before they lock on and go.
Harvard just did a practice start and looked pretty slick doing it. Neither crew, I don't think, is going to start at some of the crazy rates that we saw in the 2,000-meter races at the IRA. The water looks very good under the bridge right now.
Yep.
We don't know what kind of winds they're going to get blasting through there, though. Bridges cause a little bit of turbulence sometimes, and I think that both coaches have told their crews to start a little bit lower and not to put a 2,000-meter start together, but rather put something that's very effective together that moves the boat without costing a huge amount. Harvard doing another practice start here, and very clean, handling the water very nicely. They're just trying to loosen up, try to kill some time before the start. The warm-up is to warm the body. So that's what they're trying to do without thinking too much about the entire project that they have, but just worry about this stroke.
Yeah, and I think also probably to see if they can expend some of that adrenaline, too, that can wreak havoc if it's too strong in the first parts of the race. Andy, we're racing upstream. All 3 of these races have been upstream this year. When I raced here, we raced several of the races downstream, though very, very late in the afternoon. And the rationale, I believe, for racing upstream is just what we see today, with a tide that's going upstream, with a sea breeze that is pushing these boats upstream. If they were racing downstream today, they'd be going in the afternoon. They'd be going against the tide and the wind. So I think they try to avoid that. So it's a careful calculation, looking at both the wind and the tide to determine whether we're going to go upstream or down.
Right. Well, it's complete guesswork because the committee has to get together before they see the general weather pattern.
But they do know what the tide is going to do.
Well,
right?
Of course, they do know that. But the wind and the rain possibly is always an unknown. Unlike the other boat race that occurs in England, which is raced around a huge bend, and you might get a headwind at one part of the course and a tailwind, completely the opposite conditions on another part of the course. Here in America, it's a straight or relatively straight 4-mile course, so the conditions will be basically a headwind in the first half and then a tailwind in the second half.
Yeah.
The conditions are going to be consistent. Yale has just done another start, and they're just resting on their oars at this point.
About 5 minutes to go, Harvard's turned around, and I think Yale's going to do the same as they head for the stake boats. You were talking about the boat race over in England between Oxford and Cambridge, which happened only about 4 or 5 weeks ago, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
A very tough race, and because of the curves, these boats tend to row very, very close together, as opposed to in separate lanes as they do here, which can be a challenge, as I think we saw this year in the boat race.
Right. Well, of course, you're allowed to seize the stream or the optimal course at the boat race in England. So if you get a lead, you can move over into the other crew's water, which makes it very hard for any crew to come back.
Yeah.
And I'm proud to say that one of my former lightweights, Tom Swartz, did manage to defeat Cambridge this year in the boat race. So he earned his blue and beat Cambridge. We're very proud of Tom. I want to give him a little recognition for that. And one of the things they were able to do was, of course, get ahead of Cambridge by over length and move over.
Of course, they got that. I don't think anybody argues that Oxford might have won the race anyway, but they clashed.
Yes, they did.
Because there's a sense over in that race that the stream or the current is relatively narrow despite the width of the river, and if you're not in that stream, you're losing ground. So the boats tend to get very close together and often clash. But in this race, that clash cost the Cambridge boat dearly.
Right, he caught a crab, and the referee decided that was Cambridge's fault. They moved over into Oxford's water, so he did not stop the race, and Oxford rode away for another win in there. Now here at this course, of course, there are Stakes every half a mile. There's a yellow stake that indicates the middle of the course and red and blue flags on either side. So there's no stealing another's water here in the States. You got to go straight, and you got to beat the other man straight up.
Right.
Which is a challenge for the coxswains too. They can't hit any of those flags which are raised higher than the oar. It's not like a buoy where you can pass your oar over it. You've got to make sure you're through it completely. Two crews now are getting closer to the stake boats. Harvard underneath the Gold Star Bridge now and turning. Presumably they're going to back all the way into the stake boat as we should be about 3 minutes from the start. Yale still paddling downstream and getting closer. The tension is getting higher. Now, Charlie, do you remember these moments before your experience here at the boat race and what they were like?
Well, I must tell you, and I've had this experience no matter it was racing 4 miles or 2,000 meters, it's just the anticipation, the anxiety is high. You look down this course and you know it's 4 miles away and you say a little prayer. God, just one more time, let me make it down this course. And but that all sort of fades away as soon as you the racing starts. You're into it, and then it's just mano a mano all the way down.
Did you talk to Coach Butt before this race, and what strategy, if anything, did he reveal to you about what's it going to take to win this race?
You know, I didn't have a chance to talk to him, but I've been close to Charlie for a number of years, and I am sure that he, like Harry, get a good solid start and then press, and then press, and then press. Every stroke, make them pay. If they're going to get out for a lead, make them pay for it. And just be confident in yourself and confident in the boat speed. And every stroke, just put your best into it. Yeah.
I've been watching this race for many years, and there's been a number of times where Yale has got out to an early lead, and Harvard has done just that, grind them up, grind them up, grind them up. And usually by the 2 mile mark, the halfway point, have a commanding lead and gone through to win. And the times that Yale has won, they've done that to Harvard.
Yeah.
And coupled with some spectacular comebacks as well, as we remember.
Yeah.
So it's going to be curious today, to me, to see these crews, which seem evenly matched, mostly because of the IRA experience rather than the sprints. But the IRA experience, where the two crews were separated by about 5 to 7 seconds, I think, in the final. It's going to be very interesting to me to see how Yale plays this, whether they're going to go out and try to dominate the start and then get down to a base and just hold off Harvard, or whether they're just content to be comfortable right next to Harvard, not let them slip away, as you saw in the JV and the 3V or slash freshman race. It's going to be interesting to see what pattern Yale chooses, if indeed they can choose the pace that they want.
Right. In other words, I spent some time on a different project with the former freshman coach from Harvard, Ted Washburn, who was a very, very successful freshman coach. And he told me some of his experiences in working with Harry, and they would think about various strategies. And when he pointed out that if you rode even splits all the way down the course, you might win. You might win very well. Mm-hmm. And that going out hard and trying to get a lead, you can pay a price for that. Mm-hmm. And if you had enough confidence in the speed of your boat and the time you could do, then it might be best to row even splits. We know that works on the ergometer. It
works there, and it works in just about every other sport that's raced individually against the clock. In track and swimming, nobody races like rowers do, and yet that's what makes rowing different a little bit, is that there is an emotional component and there's a teamwork component. Sometimes it is easier. I mean, it's easy to draft when you're a runner, to draft behind the leaders to see how much you have to go and to keep the leaders in contact. In rowing, it's easy to sit in front of somebody, particularly in a dual race. It's easy to sit there and respond to every challenge. But how much, again, your question is true, how much of a price do you want to pay to get a length or half a length lead where you can sit and watch your opponent? I'm fascinated by this race and the way it's shaping up.
Yep.
I'm fascinated to see what kind of rhythm Pete can lay down for the Yale crew, and whether they're really going to be willing to follow Pete and do what he wants to do, or whether there's going to be some lack of practice together that we've seen. I mean, remember, he just got in. I mean, on Sunday, they finished the IRA, they drove up to New Jersey. Monday was an off day, and now they've had since Tuesday to get ready for a Saturday race. It's going to be curious. I'm very interested to see how this plays out.
So as we look at the boats, the Harvard boat is on the stake boat, and we can see them constantly pushing the bow towards the west as it gets blown down by this cross breeze, and I think Yale's having a little bit of trouble getting on the stake boat.
Well, they're way past it. I mean, they're way downstream of that, and well, I'm sure they'll make it.
Yeah.
We're not going to start the race without them. The Cox and Ollie Fletcher has to maneuver around. That's a little bigger stake boat that Yale has. They have a Boston Whaler that our old reliable rigger Tom Taft is manning, and
here they come.
They got to maneuver around that. Yeah. What a scene here, though. The sunshine is brilliant. There's very few puffy clouds in the sky.
Are you back to the poetry now?
Perhaps. I'm back to the poetry because they're not back on the stake boat yet, ready to start. But it is dramatic. It is a dramatic scene, and not everybody gets to do this, and it is pretty special for these athletes, and it's quite important to them at the moment.
Now, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Back in my day, when I first rode here in 1967 as a freshman, there were 150 boats lining this, and today there are none. So my suggestion to Harvard and to Yale is, why don't we have all the squads from Yale and all the squads from Harvard row on this water on this date?
Well,
your lightweights, your women lightweights, the women heavyweights, the Harvard, the heavyweight men, the lightweight men. Why not? Tell me a reason that they're not going to do that.
Because that decision is made above my pay grade. But if they let us do it, it would be pretty cool, and I'm sure all the coaches and athletes would get into the challenge.
Yeah. Now I know it's been argued that they couldn't be housed down here, but they certainly could be housed in their respective dorms and row out of Derby and row on the Charles. I'd love to see it. I think it would be great to ensure that this regatta continues. Not that there's any chance that it won't continue, but it would make it more of a regatta than we have today.
The crews now are both locked on. Again, there's the starboard side oarsmen are sculling it around to make sure that the boats remain aligned.
Sometimes they do a countdown start, don't they, Andy? Have you seen that? I don't know if we've seen that here. We've never been actually close enough to the start to do that. But instead of the attention go, they get to a point where they say 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, attention go.
Yeah, they're not going to do that. It's just attention. They raise the red flag and then go, and they go on the first movement. Particularly today, where the longer they wait, the more chance there is the boats go off course. And the referee's there to ensure that the crews get off safely, they don't collide, and that the race is as fair as possible, and let the athletes decide the outcome. And that's what they're doing now. They're just adjusting. We can't see the aligners flag at the moment, although perhaps we're swinging around to get that view.
So I think the idea here, this is a bit of a challenge for the coxswains, is to actually point the boats, instead of dead down the course, point them upwind a little bit, and then at the very moment that they think the race will start, everybody squares up his blades, the boat drops down to the right course, and off they go.
Well, like everything in sports, anticipation, or accurate anticipation, is key, and that includes the coxswain as well. You don't want your boat to be swinging to one side or the other just when the athletes are going to press and start the race. It's interesting that not all the athletes are dressed exactly alike. There's two oarsmen in the Harvard boat that are wearing white t-shirts instead of the traditional crimson, and there's a few in the Yale crew that are doing the same as well. You would anticipate here they're taking a lot of time to make sure these bows are aligned exactly. The white flag is not up yet, so we're still waiting.
Andy is talking a little bit about this idea of sculling, and what happens is, in order to keep the boat pointed in the right direction, quite often the two-man will actually take the oar of the bowman and reach out and just keep tapping the bow up into the wind, so that you're ready to race at any time. And as soon as the referee or the starter pulls the cruise, you quickly hand the oar back to the bowman and get ready to go. It's better than trying to just reach out from a long position in the bow seat, because it can often pull the boat away from the stake boat, and then you've got to start all over again.
One thing these athletes don't have to deal with, as the Oxford and Cambridge guys do, is the clattering of helicopters overhead. We don't have that kind of courage yet, or even a drone, which we've seen some tremendous rowing drone videos to date, but so far that hasn't happened. here at the boat race. But unlike the Supreme Court, which won't allow cameras in, I'm sure at some point we're going to have a drone flying overhead for 4 miles to give everybody that kind of perspective. That's a plug out there for anybody who knows how to do that sort of thing.
You know, those guys from MIT have drones going up and down the going up and down the Cambridge, or rather Charles River all the time.
Well, we're waiting still for the white flag to be raised. And none of the athletes are sitting ready yet at the catch. They're just resting on their oars comfortably here. Looks like Harvard has come off the stake boat.
And has Yale. Look at that.
Yeah, they've drifted away. Perhaps there's an anchoring problem with one or both of the stake boats, where the stake boat anchor itself has come up and turned the stake boat askew a little bit, and it's impossible to get the bows lined up yet. So they're going to have to reset some of the stake boats, I believe. And again, there's something always different happens on race day. There's Harvard taking off on a practice start, just to stay warm and stay loose, and maybe if the butterflies have gotten too many in the belly, they're here to blow off a little of that. And Yale now is paddling away from the stake boat.
Well, you know, when we had that mishap, I think it was 2 years ago, when a major powerboat came upstream and caused a very large wake to cut across the bows of both Harvard and Yale, they had to restart in the middle of the at a point maybe 3/4 down the course, and they did what we call a floating start. I mean, is that a possibility here?
No, I think they're working hard. It looks like the Yale stake boat has come apart. I don't think it would be fair to have Harvard, say, locked onto the stake boat and Yale as a floating start. That they need to take the time here to get that Yale stake boat locked down. And as we have to talk about what this, it looks like the Yale stake boat has come apart. Tom Taft, the rigger, is usually pretty good at setting those things, so he's working hard at that now. But later today, California Chrome goes for the Triple Crown at the Belmont, which is a long race, just like this one. It's the longest racetrack in America. It's 1.5 miles. And
do you
of
have
course,
money on this race?
I do not, actually. I'm not a betting man. Although, since horse racing is not an NCAA sport, I could bet on this race. However, I know nothing about the ponies, and I'm going to stay away. At least I know that much. And yet Harvard now has won 2 out of 3 against Yale, if you want to count the finish at the sprints and the finish at the IRA. And they're going, in a way, for the Triple Crown. Now, of course, if Yale could win this one, that would be a tremendous accomplishment for Coach Gladstone and all the guys in this crew. And certainly it would overcome, perhaps, the disappointment that they had finishing at the sprints and the IRA.
If they win, do they go out to stud?
I'm not going there, man. That's a good question. Moving on. I tell you what, they might go and race internationally too. I just don't know. But you know what? It wouldn't matter. The celebration at the Gales Ferry camp would be through the roof, and well deserved. This is a talented Harvard crew. It's the Eastern Sprints champion, and for them to overturn them would not only put another Yale win in the record books, but also be a little bit of revenge for that sprints experience, which I know has left a little bit of a sour taste in the mouth of the Yale oarsmen.
Well, I must say that this is a very important race for Charlie Butt, too. I sometimes have told people that poor Charlie has been carrying around 3 bricks on his shoulders. The first brick was the sprints, and he lifted that brick off his shoulders. The second brick was the IRA, and everybody wanted him to do well. So I think he got that one off his shoulders. The cinder block is the Harvard-Yale race.
Sure.
This was Harry's race, and I know that he would dearly love this victory to be able to say without, to all of his peers across the coaching, I deserve every bit of this position, and we're gonna be here and we're gonna fight.
Well, speaking on behalf of coaches everywhere, listen, what was Harry? 41-7 or 44-7? I mean, that's ridiculous. Yeah. I mean, to expect any coach in this modern era to duplicate that is absurd. You can't expect that. And this is a talented Yale crew. Yep. No question about it. It's a new Yale crew. We'll see if these last-minute changes have paid off in terms of rhythm. I mean, certainly there's a lot of power in the boat. But you know, nobody made Charlie take the job. He wanted it, and he deserves it. And it's a very binary outcome, isn't it? Just like the Oxford-Cambridge boat race. Either you win or you lose. There's no silver medal. There's no bronze medal. It's straight up, did you win or not? It's so easy just to say, how'd you do? Oh, we won. That's easy. Explaining why you lost or having it so stated so boldly, we lost, well, that's a little bit harder to take.
Yeah.
But again, that's what all the athletes here in these boats have signed up for. Yeah, they know this coming in, and they want to take part in it. If I could quote you the Teddy Roosevelt Man of the Arena thing, I would. Because we have a little bit more time to fill while they get on the stake boats. However, my memory isn't that good, and I'm not going to say it, but you can look it up on the Googles.
All right.
It seems like the Yale stake boat now is locked in to the bottom of the Thames River, and Yale is turning around and getting their stern aligned.
And we should be off here in another couple minutes. Harvard looks to be on the stake boat. We can start to see them sculling again, trying to keep the boat pointed upwind. And this wind that continues to blow almost now dead across, or have a much more of a westerly rather than a southerly component, and it's blowing straight across the course.
Yes,
making it particularly difficult for the boats to stay aligned, and for the aligner to get alignment in these boats. So Yale looks like they're on now, or close to it. These boats, these stake boats, are anchored bow and stern, so they don't move. Very different from the kind of racing we might see in the season, where you've got a dock that these boats back into. Here are just small punts that are anchored, and then you back into it. There's a person in the bow holding onto your stern and pushing it in or out, depending on what the aligner would say. Get the bows aligned, and as soon as that's aligned, we get the white flag that Andy's referred to, and Chris Grunt will start the race.
So both coxes now have their arms in the air,
which signifies that they're not ready to race.
Right, but the athletes are sitting ready.
They've been 15 minutes.
I would say this. Yeah, okay. Now Yale is sitting, ready to go. All right. So after that longer delay, it's go time. And the
there's the red flag. Down, off the go.
And we're off. A little bit of white water from the Yale shell.
Yale at 47. Harvard at 49. Got a little bit of smooth water before they hit these cross breezes.
Now they're emerging out from the shadows. Looks like Harvard has taken advantage of the early calm water under the bridge.
Harvard at 42. Yale at 37.
Yeah, Yale definitely rowing a little bit lower.
Harvard looking for the lead.
That's very interesting here early. That's a good sign of Yale can stay with Harvard,
for Harvard
rowing
now.
A little bit lower. I think that's a good start for Yale.
30. Let's try it again here.
That's a nice
bow
start.
ball to bow ball. 37 at Yale. Still looks like Yale is understroking them.
Yeah, that's a good start for Yale.
Go George.
They have to wait. They have to make sure, though, that once they get through the early strokes, that Harvard just doesn't quite slip away.
Yeah, that's it. Now that's it.
This is a nice start.
Harvard at 34 now. Yale at 34.2, I think.
Yeah, that's a very conservative stroke rate.
Yeah.
Now it's about speed and rhythm. Look over from the Harvard stroke, Andy Holmes. Yale needs to stay in contact here. They don't have to get ahead, but they need to stay in contact as they head into the first half mile here.
Yale's at 36. Harvard's at 35 as we come up to the first half mile.
And Harvard is going to hit that first. They're through at about 221. Yale now about 223. So about 2/3 of a boat length for Harvard here. Yale needs to stay in touch. They need to stop Harvard just slipping away here.
It's hard again. We're a little bit on the side of this, so rather behind it. It's hard to see what the difference is, but we'd have to call Harvard maybe a half a length lead here.
At least, yeah. Andy Holmes just took another look, another look. He only has to look one way off his port side, unlike the IRA where you just shouldn't look at all. There's people on either side of you. Harvard moving, slowly moving. Harvard coxswain straight ahead, focused on the next set of turning buoys.
34 for Harvard. 33 for Yale.
Moving out to a length, another look from Holmes. Okay, now we're 3.5 minutes into it. Now we're starting to feel the start. Now rhythm gets very important. It's very important for Yale to stick together. If they have some planned focus through this mile marker, that would be nice to have it here, where they just can feel the momentum shift. Momentum shifts into their side. They stop the Harvard move, and they can start to move back. That's what Ollie Fletcher needs to be telling his crew. They moved out, but now they have stopped moving. It's important also for the bow pair to let the rest of the guys know that Harvard's right there too. Not that they're going to feel like they have a lot of oxygen to say much, but it doesn't need much. A grunt here, a grunt there.
I think both boats are now rowing evenly. Yale has certainly stopped the move, I think, at this point, and with maybe even a little overlap with Harvard here.
We'll get a better indication as the crews come through the mile mark here. Again, Harvard on the east side will have a little bit of an advantage later on as we approach the 2 mile mark, but here's the first mile marker.
Gosh, it's awful close.
Right about now, 4:52, and about now, 4:56. Now we'll see if the rhythm from Pete can allow the big guys to unwind behind the oar and start to move the Yale shell. I would like Yale to be finishing a little easier. Looks like there's a little struggle getting out of the finish. Wish they were a little bit easier there. Easier to release. Let the boat run a little bit more.
Harvard 34.5.
But overall, certainly Yale has stopped Harvard moving away. There's definitely contact now.
36 I have it for Yale.
Pete's got to feel the support behind him. If he feels that, he can go all day and really make this a 4-mile contest. You don't want to let Harvard make it a shorter contest where the last 1.5 miles is decided. You want to push these guys all the way down the course and see if they have enough to respond, because it will have to be now a Yale come from behind victory. You know, we've gone over 6 minutes now. It is definitely Harvard has made a push.
Yeah, I think that really began at that mile marker. Tend to try to make those moves at the markers, which one would think that the other crews would anticipate.
Well, there's your pace, and then there's what the other crew is doing, and at this point, you do need to have your pace well established. And sometimes, you have to find out if your pace is as good as the other crews.
Yeah.
It looks like, Harvard has increased that by a little bit. I really wish the two crews were closer together in terms of east and west.
Thwartships,
yeah. Right, the thwartships, thank you. That's some nautical poetry there.
Yeah.
And Harvard now definitely has open water as we're coming into over 7 minutes in the race now. And as the crews move slightly apart, I mean, I
wonder that, in terms of both crews are trying to work their way west. Don't you believe this? In order to get out of some of this water, feeling that there's a little bit smoother water to the west than the east. I mean, Harvard's pretty well up against that middle buoy, and Yale's up against the western buoy.
Right. Yeah, Harvard's as far west as they can be without violating the lanes. But now it's, yes, Harvard has, I'd say, half a length open water now at least. Yeah, this isn't the way that Yale wanted it to go. We are approaching Mammocoke Hill and the halfway point. But, they're only half a length back from where they would want to be. There's still a chance.
Yeah. I think it'll be telling what happens to both these crews as they go through the half-mile mark. Because I'm sure that their race plans call for a big move halfway.
They can't let Harvard get too comfortable here. If you're comfortable, the race is 4 miles. It's not impossible. You train for this. It's not a marathon. But if you're uncomfortable, it's a long way.
Yeah.
And Yale's job is to make Harvard more uncomfortable than they are right now.
Pay the price.
Yeah. They've got to, we want, from the Yale side, we want Harvard to hear the coxswain and to hear our athletes. And right now they're able to get away and not have to hear Ollie and the battle rattle, if you will, of the shell from Yale. We're coming under the shelter of Mammocoke Hill. Harvard definitely has, I'd say, half a length open right now.
Yeah, I mean, call it almost a length at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And as we look down the course, the water goes flat, and both crews, I'm sure, will make a big move here at the 2 miles to go, halfway point.
Right. Looks like the gap between the blue westerly flag and the yellow mid-course flag is a little tighter for Yale than it is on the east side for Harvard. So that we won't have exactly an accurate movement through, but right now Harvard's through in about 9:34, and Yale will be through about now, that's 9:41.
Both crews, 33.5, 34.
I mean, Pete looks good. I mean, the Yale stroke looks good. He's making a nice rhythm. The only thing that makes it not look good is that Harvard's a length out. And that's the thing.
Yeah.
It's a binary decision. If you're not ahead, you're behind. And Yale has to use the better water here.
That's called a tautology, I think.
Okay.
Yale stroke is really pretty.
Yeah.
Beautiful stroke.
Right, and Harvard is also rowing very well. Andy Holmes has a lot of experience there. He's making it happen for Harvard right now.
Now, Andy, Harvard's starboard stroked and Yale is port stroked. Is there any difference?
No. Yeah, good athletes are good athletes. They happen to row a particular side.
But I rode the starboard side, and I have a particular
and then ports are the far superior side. We know that. Even though I was a former starboard too. Listen, Harvard is starting to really take control of the race, and I would say they're rowing a little longer than Yale.
Look ahead here. Look way ahead. We got two boats right in the middle of the race course.
That's right. I don't know if the camera can lift its view. This is something that the referee has to deal with. I think that Coast Guard boat is talking to that pleasure craft, trying to escort them quietly without a huge wake off the course.
I'm just wondering if that boat that he's talking to is without power.
Not sure.
I think that they may be to the west of the course now. That we've got a better shot at it.
Right. So we're going by the subbase here, and Harvard is now a little bit more to the east, passing closer to the red flag than they were to the yellow in previous markers. We're coming up on the 12-minute mark now. Yeah, I think we're okay on those. There's no chance of a collision.
Coast Guard's been a big help. They closed the river for us after the 2-mile race, and are patrolling it both from the north and the south to ensure that we don't have the kind of wake problems we had a couple of years ago.
Well, we're over 12 minutes in the race now, Charlie, and the coxswain for Harvard taking a nice course. We've got a good line on it. They can see the finish line now, or the coxswain can.
Yeah.
They can certainly, all the oarsmen can see where Yale is and can respond to any threat. You know, you talked about the concrete block, perhaps, or the
Cinder
the
block,
cinder block that, you know, Charlie, anytime you succeed, a very successful and historic coach, really, there is that pressure to succeed, and right now his crew is performing brilliantly. Yeah. And that Yale crew is pretty good. I mean, they were undefeated for the season.
Now, how much change was in this crew from the IRA? Was there much?
Well, the stroke is different. He came from a lower boat.
Same eight men.
Essentially, right.
Yeah.
But, you know, you're looking for a little alchemy. You're looking to catch a little fire and get a little bit of rhythm. I think the power is there. But, you know, Andy Holmes has been the Harvard stroke all year. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And certainly there's a lot of trust in him. And the guys can just feed off of that. Right now, Harvard is striding away nicely.
33, and Yale 33.
You know, I really shouldn't get hung up on how far Yale is moving to the west. We've calculated in our interim here that if you started on a 2,000-meter buoyed course, you started in lane 6, and you over the 2,000 meters, you moved into lane 1. The difference is only 5 feet. You go 5 feet more.
Right.
So moving laterally, particularly if you're catching a better water, isn't that dramatic. Footage loss, if you will.
Yeah.
So the fact that they've moved slightly apart should bother me a little less than it does. But the fact that Yale is behind Harvard as much as they are, that should rankle all the blue fans out here, and there are many. Right now, Harvard is going through. They're going to break 14:30 here to this marker right about now, 14:26. We'll try to get a Yale time as they come through. And there's 10 seconds now, and right about now, that's about 14:40. So about 14 seconds behind at this point.
Of course, what happens in this kind, we've talked about this in previous races, Andy, when you get this kind of a lead, you can take just a hair off the pressure,
sure,
and the boat goes faster.
Yes.
Whereas if you're behind, you begin to scramble a bit. You try to pull harder to see if you could get that speed up, and in my experience, it's sometimes slower.
Yeah, over-trying is a problem.
Yeah.
You know, it's important to be accurate and not overshoot or undershoot.
Yeah.
You've got to nail the rhythm right. And I'm sure you talked to every coach that was not successful. That's a huge part of why they break down their crews and look at their performances. You know, rhythm and hitting it just right on the day is important. Looks like Harvard has really hit it quite well today. And now the referee is steering Harvard a little bit to starboard. Well, it's interesting. You were mentioning before how some of the Harvard guys in the varsity are going on to compete for the U23 teams in their respective home countries. You know, Yale has a number of those guys as well, and that's a testament to the level of U.S. collegiate rowing, that they can attract talented oarsmen from all over the world, not only by the virtue of their academic reputations and excellence, but also because of the quality of rowing. Any real oarsman doesn't want to spend time rowing for clubs that aren't high quality, and the fact that they'll come overseas and come to the States and take.
Well, we talked about this last year, and I might ask you to repeat what you said last year. And the question I put to you then was, why so many internationals? And you began the explanation, and maybe pick it up again, was that if you're looking for the best possible crews, you're trying to recruit the best possible individuals, you've got to have a bigger pool than just those that are available in the United States. I think that was that. Did I get that right?
That's accurate, right? You know, if you can widen your pool, many of these institutions in the Ivy League with these two schools are becoming more international in flavor, and that's part of it. You know, if you can get the best guys in every country, you're going to do it. You know, they have to pass the academic muster, of course, but.
And has the age of these individuals gone up? I mean, so some of these guys coming in as freshmen are 21, 22, I understand. Is that...
Yes, you might see that. It's not
Yeah.
quite like hockey yet, but it's getting there, sure.
Sure.
And in terms of years of rowing experience, yeah, they're a lot more mature. You know, the days of you row a couple years in high school and then you're a stud, those kids still exist, but it's harder to compete at this level. Just the game has been raised.
You know,
The bar has been raised, I should say.
Andy, I was a walk-on. I don't... How many walk-ons are there in the...
We still try to find them.
Yeah.
There's still a room for that, but
I can remember registration. There was a
Right.
bar. If you had to duck to get underneath it, you were a candidate. You know,
that still happens. But
it's tough.
not. Yes, it's
Yeah.
like with all things, it seems to be getting more intense and more serious and more demanding and a higher level.
Yep.
It's higher quality rowing, and Harvard's doing that right now. You know, they're maybe expunging some of the memories from the IRA.
Yeah, I'm sure that they wanted to go out of the season
Sure.
on and up, and they certainly have done this, and it's going to be a great victory for Charlie Butt, who I think is probably one of the great technicians of the sport. And you can see that they're rowing beautifully here.
You know, if this is the final race for these guys this year as an 8, you know, they've had a great year, undefeated regular season, sprints champs, 5th at the IRA, and now victors of the boat race in about 30 seconds or so as they come past the rock.
"20 strokes to go. Start counting out the tens."
So this is going to be under 20 minutes for Harvard. Certainly no record today on the upstream side.
32 for Harvard as they go through the line. We'll watch for the flag. The flag goes down.
So 1932.3 unofficially.
Up.
And 1946.4. So about a 14-second
14 seconds.
deficit for the Bulldogs. Both crews bent over their oars, as you might expect. A 19-minute effort.
It's a long, long way, Andy. Well, what a great day of racing here. What a great day of racing. We've had 3 long races. The first 2-miler with the 3rd Varsity, racing for the City of New London Cup, with Harvard winning in a time of 9:19, and Yale finishing in 9:22, a 3-second difference, about a length. That was the closest race we've had today. The second varsity race for the F. Valentine Chapel Cup, again won by Harvard in a time of 4:15, 4:16 perhaps, and Yale in 4:33, basically a 17-second gap. And Andy, give me those times again for the Sexton Cup. The varsity was
Right. Unofficially was Harvard 1932.3.
1932.
And Yale was 1946.4.
14 seconds. 14 seconds. So Harvard wins all 3 races today. One by a very close margin, and the others a bit more distance between themselves and Yale. Well, it's been a wonderful day out here on the water. I mean, great. What did you call it? Glistening waves and great wind or lack thereof. Made for very good and fair racing. This has been the 149th Harvard-Yale Regatta. Next year, the 150th, since the 1852 start in Lake Winnipesaukee. Here on this great tradition, the Harvard-Yale Regatta. We'd like to give thanks to the captain of our boat, the Juliet and Betsy, George White, and old Yaley was here, eager to help and ferry us up and down this course. Thanks to George. Thanks to the to the Coast Guard for all of their efforts in managing the waterway here, the Thames, so that we could have good, fair racing. Thanks to all the boaters up and down the Thames who were kind enough to lend us their water for this evening, for these races today. So we'll sign off and look forward to talking to you again next year when Andy and I will be back. Maybe George White and his boat will be back too. And we'll be there for the 150th Harvard-Yale race. So thanks to the guys on the radio, the guys on the WICH, which radio, 1310 on your AM dial. Stay with these guys. They're the best. Have a great day. Thanks for joining us here at the Harvard-Yale race.